Can the Phillies win more games? Do they finally have the talent to put them in that wild card mix? You know, a lot of times in baseball, it seems that the process can be very elongated. You know, you draft guys, they go through the minors, you hear like guys like J.P. Crawford's name for years and years and years, and it's like, okay, you make the trade with the Hamels deal. You got guy Jorge Alfaro, probably, will he compete for a job? But, we'll see if the Phillies, who have been kind of plodding along, have a shot this year. I mean, Pete Mackinnon said something yesterday I thought that stood out. He said if guys, even if they have minimal gains from a bunch of guys, that should mean more success. What level of success is Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com in Clearwater with the Phillies? He joins us with a look at the Fightins. As Ryan, it's been a while since there has been a lot of buzz about this team, right? I mean, you've been going to spring training for a long time. That place used to be rocking. It seems like it's been a while since there's been some legitimate buzz around the team. Any extra excitement this year, or is this another year where people are kind of in wait-and-see mode?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to another of the writers last night about that. This is my 10th spring training, and I've seen all kinds where, 2008, it was a little quiet. I mean, there was excitement, a lot of expectations coming off a playoff year. And then the 3 spring trainings after that were just nuts because they were kind of the team. They'd won the World Series, and so when they arrived at camp in 2009, it was pretty, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz. There were national writers here every day. They were the hot team, and then the last, 4 springs, it's slowly devolved into, okay, let's get rid of the veterans, and the last 2 springs, this spring and last spring, are very similar in that there's just so much youth in that room. So yeah, I'd say it's kind of a wait and see, but I would say a more hopeful wait and see than it was, say, last year, because there's just so much more promising youth, and they seem to be trending upward. All these guys. Really, the AAA roster that'll begin the season in April, there will be a pretty good prospect at every position other than third base, and obviously they have a pretty good third baseman here in the major leagues, and a young one at that. So yeah, the fact that that AAA team is just going to be full of prospects, both in the lineup and on the mound, that's good. And obviously those guys are in AAA, so it's not the major league product yet, but it's one step closer than it was last year.
Yeah, Ryan, I want to start with what Andy McPhail kind of highlighted the other day. I mean, there was no secret about it that pitching is their number one goal for not only this year, the organization as a whole. I count about 7 or 8 guys competing for 5 spots. I mean, do you think the 5 are pretty entrenched, or do you think there will be some interesting battles during spring training? Because Velazquez, he's probably about the 5 spot. You got Buchholz, you got Eichhoff, you also have Hellickson. So who's the odd guys out in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say those 5 are pretty entrenched. When Eichhoff, Hellickson, Buchholz, Nola, and who did I not say?
Nola's the guy I forgot, but the other guy would be
Yeah, so the 5 starters are pretty entrenched there if they're all healthy. Obviously, Nola, is coming off a season when he didn't pitch for the last 2 months of the season. And all signs point that he's healthy now, but it's February 15th. Let's see everybody, not only Nola but everybody get through spring healthy. Odds are when you're here for 7 weeks and you have this many pitchers, there are going to be a couple that have tweaks or strains or something. It happens. Pitchers are probably the most fragile. That position is probably the most fragile of any position in any sport, to be honest with you, because really it is that one, just that one arm. That's all it is, and a lot can happen because of the strain they put on it on a daily basis. Really.
Yeah, by the way, it's Hellickson, Nola, Eichhoff, Buchholz, and Velazquez. They're the 5, and then you got Jake Thompson, Zach Eflin, Morgan, and Asher, I guess, as kind of guys who would be in contention. But you see Thompson, Eflin, I guess they're the top 2. Have a shot of being in the rotation.
That's why I said that AAA rotation is going to be, it's going to have a lot of talent in it, and a lot of guys that you're not going to worry about when they, if someone does get hurt and they call a guy up, it's not going to be like you're going to be looking through your hands like a horror movie. You're going to be kind of excited about it because it's going to be a kid that either has had a taste in the big leagues or a guy that deserves it. Ben Lively's another one that he finished the year very strong at AAA, and he's a guy that is in that mold of the Eflins and the Ashers and the Thompsons. So there's just a lot of depth, and really it's about creating that depth, because just like I got done telling you, you have pitchers that get injured every year. I mean, last year, Charlie Morton, Aaron Nola, these are guys that for a large chunk of the season were not. Morton was just about the whole season. And those are just two major league starters. Usually all throughout the organization or even in the bullpen, you have guys that get hurt. So the more depth that you have, the better off you're going to be. And really, in McPhail, the other part of that is that there's so much risk in signing free agent pitchers, because usually when you're signing free agent pitchers, they're already close to 30. And when you're close to 30, you have a lot of bullets on that arm, kind of like Roy Halladay and Cliff Lee when the Phillies acquired those guys. Roy Halladay was excellent, really the best pitcher in baseball for his first 2 years with the Phillies, and then the next 2 years we know what happened. So there's a lot of risk if you just surround your organization with hitters and you just say, okay, well, we'll sign free agent pitchers. There's just a lot of risk there, because you end up giving pitchers 90, 100, 150 million, and you might only get 2 good years out of them because they just get hurt. That's just the way it works. What McPhail is getting at is just the more pitching depth that you add, the more likely that you're going to get guys that are going to be productive big league pitchers. And you can also trade guys. Maybe I remember what the Kansas City Royals did, where 1 year they traded Zach Greinke, bona fide ace, and they brought in prospects kind of like the Phillies did with Cole Hamels. But then a couple years later they needed that pitcher, and so they turned around and took that the depth of prospects that they had, and they were able to trade for James Shields. So the Phillies, again, the more depth you have pitching, it enables you to do a lot of things, either improve the product on the field or make a trade if you have to for a youngish starter that's a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, and we saw what happened to this team, 2 years ago, where they were throwing just vagabonds and Jerome Williams was getting starts. It was bad.
Let's not relive that.
Ryan Lawrence
Kevin
is in
Correa.
Ryan Lawrence is in Philly. PhillyVoice.com. Read Ryan's spring training coverage. Let's go to the bullpen, because you see he said Gomez is the guy, but do you anticipate some competition, much better competition than last year, where it seemed like nobody won the job and Gomez took it over in the middle of the first month of the season? This time around, Benoit, you got Neris, you got Gomez, and I guess Nishak would be more of a seventh or later inning guy, but you have some more competition for closer.
Yeah, Eddie Ramos is another one that throws pretty hard, and he could be like this year's Neris. He had a very promising rookie season. And, maybe that now that he has that under his belt, kind of like Neris, he can take that next step in his second year this year. I don't necessarily – it seems like Pete is pretty strong in his will to make sure that Gomez starts the season as the closer. I think they just feel like they owe it to him because of what he did last year for the Pen. And obviously the last 6 weeks of the season were not good for Gomez. But, they don't want to forget what he did for the first 4 months, which was really – provide a very stable option in the ninth inning, and they had a lot of one-run games last year, and he did the job. And what Matt Klentak pointed out today was that in the playoffs, obviously this was on display. It's not always about just the ninth inning. It's also important to be covered in those other innings, because a lot of times you have more high leverage outs in the seventh or eighth inning than you will in the ninth, just because of the way the games are played and the situations that arise. So I don't know if Gomez is going to spend the whole season in the ninth inning role. I would tend to lean that he won't. But even regardless, what they have this year is they just have more options and more protection for Gomez. And Eddie Ramos, Hector Neris, even Pat Neshek, Benoit, who has a history as a closer. I think he was the closer 1 year for Detroit when they won a division. So, he has some experience in the role. They have guys that can plug in there. So just that depth should make the bullpen better this year.
It's pitchers and catchers. So let's look at the catching spot, because Ruiz is out. Rupp, did a fine job in taking over that spot last year, hitting he ended up hitting 252, showed a little power with 16 homers. He'll probably get the bulk of the opportunities there. But what about behind him should be pretty? That's one of the rare, it seems like, battles on this roster is who will be that second guy.
Yeah, and then, part of it, too, is the 40-man roster comes into play, because they just have so many prospects on that 40-man roster that there isn't a ton of flexibility, because they need to keep those guys on. They can't take them off the 40-man, or another team can claim them. So with that said, I think they would like Andrew Knapp to win it. He's a guy that, is a catching prospect. He was a second-round pick. I think it was the same year that they drafted J.P. Crawford. He was the second-round pick. He had a really good year 2 years ago at Double-A. Last year he was okay. And I think that they would, eventually him and Alfaro are going to need to see extended playing time in the big leagues. And I think Alfaro is ready for AAA, and Alfaro definitely needs more seasoning. So because of that, I think they would like Knapp to come up here and, to have a really good spring, I should say, and, to kind of force their hand a little bit. And he definitely has the capabilities as an offensive catcher to put on a good show this spring and to win the job. And they have a little bit of flexibility because he can also play first base. So you don't want to bring up a prospect and have him just be the backup catcher. You'd like to get him a little bit more bats than a traditional backup catcher. And they can do that because they really don't have a obvious backup first baseman. And the fact that he is a switch hitter gives them some, versatility there that he could, give Tommy Joseph the occasional day off. I don't think Tommy Joseph's going to play 160 or start 162 games. So I think they would like for that to happen. But they have a couple of veterans, as you always do, in camp. Of course, I'm forgetting their names. Hannigan. I haven't written about the catchers yet, so they're not all fresh on my mind. But yeah, they have other guys that will compete. But I got to think that going into camp, that Knapp is the guy that they would like to see win the job.
Yeah, Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com. You mentioned Joseph, who used to be a catcher. He's now the everyday first baseman. Yeah. They didn't really bring in a guy to platoon with him, right? So is the anticipation that he plays, maybe not all 162, but he's going to play against righties, lefties, and get 140, 135 games out there?
Yeah, and I think that's the natural progression for him. It wasn't the worst thing in the world for him to share time with Ryan Howard last year because, your first introduction to the big leagues, you want to keep a guy confident. If you run him out there every day, he might fail more often than not, and maybe it would sap his confidence a little bit. But I think that it worked out well. I mean, they actually did. If you remember when Chase Utley broke into the league, it was similar that he was sharing time with Placido Blanco. So yeah, and I think this is the next gradual progression for Joseph is to give him the chance to be the everyday first baseman, sink or swim. And he's at the point in his career that he should get that opportunity. And they do. They have some first base prospects. Reese Hoskins is one. So there are guys, knocking on the door, just like there are guys knocking on the door just about every position. But that's a good thing, competition. And, yeah, I think that they could have went out and got a veteran first baseman, maybe to platoon with Joseph, in kind of the Howard-like role. But, the two veterans they added are outfielders in Saunders and Kendrick, even though Kendrick could probably play some first. But, yeah, I think it only makes sense for where this team is as an organization, trying to see – if guys are a part of the future, Joseph should be afforded that opportunity. We seem to forget, for all that he's gone through in his career, that he was a pretty good hitting prospect when they acquired him in the Hunter Pence trade. He was the leading guy they got back in that trade. It was just injuries that kept him sidelined. So,
right, which the Giants only moved because they had a block. Obviously Buster Posey was in that spot.
Right. Yeah. So, this is a kid that has talent, and he's still a kid. It's funny, I think he's 24, 25. So, it's not like he's, an older type prospect. He's at the age that, he should be getting out there every day and playing and get the opportunity to hold on to that job.
Hey, Ryan Lawrence is with us. The middle infield's interesting because Hernandez had a really solid season. You've got Freddie Galvis, who I guess isn't going to play for the World Baseball Classic now, which might be a good thing for him. But you got J.P. Crawford kind of hanging around in the wings. How do you see the middle infield kind of materializing through the course of this year?
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. Galvis had an interesting year last year in that he had 20 home runs, which kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. I mean, he's been a guy that always has had a little bit of pop for his size as a shortstop. And I remember when he first came up into the big leagues, it just seemed like anytime he did get a hit, it was an extra base hit. And you're like, whoa, kid doesn't hit very often. But when he does, it seems to work out all right. But and he obviously plays exceptional defense. He was easily one of the best defenders, shortstops in National League. So, the defense that he brings alone it shows up every day, especially when you have a young pitching staff. Cesar Hernandez had a breakout year last year, and it's really hit ever since becoming the everyday guy when Utley got hurt the previous year. His defense is decent, and And then obviously, like you said, JP's knocking on the door. I think that, they're not rushing JP up here. And Crawford did finish kind of not great at AAA last year. I think I just had the stats in my story I wrote on Freddie Galvis this morning. It's up on the website. I think JP batted under 200 with like a maybe 300 on base percentage in his last 39 games. So what they want JP to do is go do what Tommy Joseph did last year and get off to a start at AAA that forces their hand. If JP, the first 6 weeks of the season, is hitting 350 with a 375 on base percentage, he'll force their hand, and they're going to have to make a spot for him. And, at that point in the season, that's why both Freddie and Cesar need to get off to a good start, because if they don't, or one of them does and the other doesn't, one of them's going to end up on the bench probably. And like I said, Freddie's defense is good enough that he could be a second baseman just as easily as a shortstop and be a very, very good defensive second baseman.
All right, Ryan, the outfield's interesting. They brought Kendrick in, and they made a little under-the-radar move the other day with Coughlin. He won the World Series last year. He's a Rookie of the Year. Nava's a veteran. They got Nick Williams. Herrera, they gave a deal. You got Quinn, who was up here last year. They signed Saunders. They had Altair. Goodell was up here last year. The fans probably are going to love Cousins. So how do you see – that's a lot of names thrown out there. How do you see the outfield materializing?
Well, the starting outfield is pretty obvious, with Herrera in center, and then the two guys they added, Howie Kendrick in left and Michael Saunders in right. And because of that, a guy like Roman Quinn, he's going to start the season at AAA. There's no sense in having a prospect like that sit on the bench. He needs to be playing every day and continue to grow as a player, especially a guy like him who has had trouble staying on the field and getting those reps. He needs those reps. So, and similarly, Nick Williams, Dylan Cousins, they're guys, they're obviously AAA outfitters. They're both have a lot of promise, but, Cousins was only at AA last year. He hit 40 home runs, so I'm not going to try to tear him down too much. But he's a guy that, needs to learn to hit off-speed pitches. So I think going to AAA and facing more seasoned pitchers will help him, his development. Nick Williams did not have a great year last year, although everybody you run in here down here and with a Phillies emblem on their shirt likes to remind you that it really was August when his season started to go bad. So it wasn't like his season was all terrible. But, those guys all need to develop a little bit more. And the good thing is those outfitters that the Phillies added, Kendrick and Saunders, are only signed through this year guaranteed. So anytime those other guys are ready, if Nick Williams – similar to what I just said about J.P. Crawford, if Nick Williams goes off in the first 2 months of the season and it's hitting, 300 with pretty good on-base percentage and good power numbers, he'll force their hand. They'll promote him, and he'll get worked into that regular rotation. Maybe he'll have to share time initially, but again, those guys, Saunders, Kendrick, they could be traded before the trade deadline. It wouldn't be surprising if they do, if they're producing. So there's opportunity for all of those outfitters you mentioned. It won't come on opening day, but it shouldn't, because none of them are ready.
Yeah, and Saunders is a guy who made the All-Star game last year for the American League, had a really hot start, but seems like he's better suited in a platoon role. Do you see that in right field, Altair getting the left-handed pitching at bats, or do you think Saunders will be the everyday guy?
Yeah, I think Saunders will still be the everyday guy. I mean, it's up to Altair, too, to kind of, prove his worth. And maybe he didn't get the longest of looks, but and he was coming off an injury, so maybe you should give him a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt. But, he didn't hit all that well last year. And, his major league report card in general is pretty incomplete. It's not like he's a proven guy. But, yeah, I mean, I think he could get worked in. And, as the fourth outfielder, he will get reps. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's a very good defensive outfitter, so I wouldn't be surprised if, Odubel Herrera needs occasional day off. I don't think Odubel Herrera is going to get many days off, but when he does, Altair can be worked in there too. Kendrick's an older guy. I don't think he's going to be playing 160 games. He can get reps there. But, yeah, I think they brought in Saunders for a reason, and Saunders is the guy that hit 24 home runs last year and, does have some pretty, he's a proven player with some skills that I don't think Saunders will be in a strict platoon situation. I think he will, be the everyday right fielder more often than not. All
right. Where is any of these guys in terms of the younger guys? Do you see any of them surprising and making the 25-man out of spring training?
No, I mean, I know probably fans want to hear the opposite, but I just don't. I mean, Andrew Knapp is probably the only prospect that has a realistic shot at making that 25-man roster, because really the only other spots that are open, I mean, the starting 8 spots are accounted for. We just said the rotation is accounted for. The bullpen, there really aren't bullpen prospects per se. That the only really openings on this 25-man roster today, with everybody healthy. Now, again, that could change 3 weeks from today, 2 weeks from today. But today, the only openings are bench spots, and you're not going to bring up Nick Williams or Roman Quinn or any of those guys to be bench players, because it would sap that you want to have them continue their progression as prospects, and they need to get regular at bats. And really, like I said, guys like Nick Williams still have something to prove. I don't think no matter what they do in spring training stats, you really have to kind of have a very, to look at them with a grain of salt. I don't think rarely do you see a guy win a job out of spring training, a prospect. Usually you still want them to go, and I just don't think any of those guys are on that cusp just yet. I think they're close. Like I said, I think with those guys that are especially close, like a J.P. Crawford, they want them to go to AAA season, gain confidence, and put up great numbers. Again, I think Tommy Joseph's the best example. What he did last year, I wasn't even in Major League camp last year, but he impressed so much in the first 5 weeks of the season at AAA that he forced their hand and they had to promote him. So I think that's the way that these guys are going to work their way on the roster. It's not going to happen on April 1st, but it could happen on, say, May 10th.
Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com. Last one for you, as obviously it's very early. Pitchers and catchers just in there, but different vibes, different feels. Does it feel like a team that thinks they're a possible playoff team, or is it kind of feel like, hey, we just want to have a 500 year and kind of build on what we did last year?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to run into a player that's going to say we suck. We're second, division team. We're going to finish in last. Of course, to a man, they're all going to say that we should compete for a playoff spot. I mean, if you don't say that, you probably need to be in a different line of work. I mean, as an athlete, that should be the goal. You should have the confidence that you are going to be the best version of yourself. But the reality is, from an outsider and an objective outsider like myself, a lot has to go right. And pretty much you would need Michael Franco to be the best version of himself, to have that breakout year that we all thought he was going to have last year. You need Jeremy Hellickson to be what he was last year and more. You need Clay Buchholz to be, the pitcher he was that 1 or 2 seasons in Boston, a legitimate top of the rotation guy and not the guy he's been the last 2 years. You need Aaron Nola to be healthy. You need Velasquez to take that next step. You need Eichhoff to be the guy he was last year. So, yeah, you have to go around the diamond, and I didn't even get to the offense last year, which last year was the worst offense in baseball. So, that's just a lot to ask. They did make some improvements to the lineup, but, I think realistically you'd have to look more toward next year of maybe getting on that radar a little bit more when those guys like J.P. Crawford are a little bit more entrenched, and hopefully, if you're a Phillies fan, succeeding in the big league level, and then going into that. And really, the timing is great because they have all this financial flexibility on their payroll that if they take that next step this year and become competitive, and then take that next step next year where they're kind of on the radar of competing for a wild card. After the 18 season, you enter that free agent class that's just ridiculous. Bryce Harper, Andrew McCutchen, possibly Clayton Kershaw, Manny Machado, Josh Donaldson. The Phillies are going to have the money to go get 2 and 3 of those guys. And I'm not saying that's the way that you need to do it, but the fact that they have the flexibility and as a big market team, the wherewithal to do that, if you can complement young guys like Dylan Cousins and J.P. Crawford and Aaron Nola, at that time Vince Velasquez, with these proven veterans that are free agents, then all of a sudden there's going to be some excitement here in Clearwater.
Yeah, we got to get that buzz back in Clearwater. It's always a lot more fun when there's some buzz down there. It's not Bright House Field anymore. What's it called now?
Spectrum Field.
Oh, Spectrum Field. I saw that. Who had Spectrum Arena the other night? Where was that? In Charlotte, I think it was. Ryan Lawrence,
yeah.
PhillyVoice.com for all of the Phillies stuff. He's down there with the Phils as they kick off the 2017 season. All right, my friend. We'll see you down there soon.
Okay. Good talking to you, Mike.